This is Jacob Morgan, who at 17 years old was found guilty of setting a house fire that killed a family member in Rock Hills, South Carolina. Morgan was left alone to look after his 14-month-old stepbrother, and reportedly prosecutors said Morgan intentionally set the fire that killed his family member. In court, Morgan is at a probable cause. Hearing listen as the judge speaks.
So therefore, I am going to find that there is probable cause to charge the individual for General Sessions Court for late charges.
Morgan settled for a plea deal where he pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and unlawful neglect of a child. However, he stated he loved his brother, and he always maintained his innocence.
I love my brother. I still do to this very day. My best friend. To kill him and killing the pieces myself. I just wish I could have gotten to it in time.
Morgan was sentenced to 15 years in prison, but after serving only 7 years, he reportedly was released. This is Christopher McNabb, who is facing charges for the murder of his 2-week-old child in Covington, Georgia, after the child's mother reported the baby missing to police. Local law enforcement immediately launched a search. Later that night, McNabb is seen in front of TV cameras begging for his child back.
I want my kid back, man. That's my child, man. I want my kid, man.
The next day, the child's body was found in a nearby wooded area. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, which was later ruled a homicide. McNabb was arrested and charged with the murder of his own 2-week-old baby after he was found guilty. We now move on to the sentencing. McNabb can then be heard claiming his innocence.
I'm innocent. I didn't do it. I've maintained that the whole time. I would never do this. That's all I gotta say. I would never do it. I'm innocent.
And now the judge lets McNabb unknowingly choose his own sentence.
You claim you're innocent, so you tell me what sentence the man or woman that you claim did this should receive.
If you ever find out who did them, they deserve to be under the jail.
Okay, so they ought to get the maximum sentence.
Most definitely.
Okay. On the crime of malice murder, I sentence you to life in confinement without parole. On considering the death of another, I sentence you...
After McNabb was handed down the max sentence, he was moved to Hayes State Prison in Tryon, Georgia, where he is serving his life sentence. This is Franklin Williams, who is convicted of multiple felonies, including armed robberies and fleeing police in Cleveland, Ohio.
Again, I'm going to interrupt. Mr. Williams, listen to me. I'm going to gag you in 1 second.
Williams conducted 3 armed robberies before leading police on a high-speed chase. Now at his sentencing, he was later arrested and convicted. Now at his sentencing, Williams would not stop talking despite more than a dozen warnings from the judge.
That means zip it right now. Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't. That's a violation of the HIPAA law, Judge.
Here we go.
This resulted in the judge ordering Williams' mouth to be taped shut.
If you spit on, attempt to bite, or injure any of my deputies, you're going to have a bad day.
That's what it is.
At a following court appearance, Williams has something to share with the judge and cameras.
Freedom of speech, no duct tape. With the hashtag.
Aside from all the interruptions, the judge can hand down Williams' sentence.
I faced a potential maximum consecutive sentence of 134 years. I ordered a 24-year sentence.
After Williams received a 24-year prison sentence, the judge later apologized for the duct tape, and throughout that sentence he then appointed a new judge, where she sentenced him to 33 years behind bars. This is Kemya Gamut, who is charged with the murder of her boyfriend in Jackson, Mississippi. Reportedly, the attack happened during an argument between the two individuals and ended with the boyfriend being violently stabbed to death. Gamut was arrested on first-degree murder charges in court. Gamut would claim her murder was in self-defense and her boyfriend was attacking her. But in the end, she was found guilty of murder.
The way I was portrayed, mostly everything was lies. There was a little bit of truth, but mostly I was convicted off of lies.
We now move into the sentencing, where Gamut reportedly kept interrupting the judge.
You're gonna shut your mouth or I'm gonna have some duct tape put on it.
With Gamut showing no remorse, the judge has some final words.
You stabbed, you stabbed, you stabbed, you stabbed until he was dead. I agree with the family. I hope you die in prison as well. You know, if this was a death penalty state, you'd be getting the chair.
In the end, Gamut was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This is Kimberly Kessar, who was charged with the murder of her co-worker in Nassau County, Florida.
Jordan Beard is Jolene Cummings' cousin.
Kessar was working at a tangled hair salon under a fake name. She reportedly was on the run for 25 years. and wanted in several states, she wouldn't be found until she brutally murdered her co-worker with scissors and allegedly disposed of her body and awaiting trial. This is Kesar after waiting his trial.
Are we on mute anyway, so I can say whatever the I want?
We're not on mute.
Oh, okay.
And this is what it was like to supervise her in jail.
And to remove feces from styrofoam trays in the back of her cell and smear it on herself on the walls. She began to throw feces at Smith, Miller, and I.
Now in the trial, she had to go to a separate room due to her outburst.
I refuse the public defender's office. They appointed Jolie Cummings' cousin as my public defender. What, you don't want the public to know that?
And she continuously made false claims about her former public defender.
Jordan Beard is Jolie Cummings' cousin. Jordan Beard is Jolie's cousin.
She was later found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. This is Keandrea Cook, who was found guilty of carjacking charges in Volusia County, Florida. 18-year-old Cook and her then 17-year-old boyfriend had used a dating app to set up a carjacking, where the boyfriend reportedly shot the victim, leaving him seriously injured. After fleeing the scene and being on the run, the pair attempted another carjacking just 2 days later. But they were arrested. Now in court, Cook stands in front of the judge for her involvement in the theft and shooting.
She's guilty of all 3 charges, sentenced you to 20 years in state prison.
That is Cook's mother that can be heard crying. Reportedly, the reason for this very emotional outburst is there was a miscommunication with the assistant public defender, where Cook and her mother thought she wouldn't face any prison time. Cook's sentence was later reduced to 11 years in prison. This is Anthony Kirkland, who is a convicted serial killer in Cincinnati, Ohio.
They say I am evil and a monster. They're right. Even my mom hated me, but I don't blame her.
Kirkland had previously served a 16-year prison sentence for the killing of his ex-girlfriend a few years after his release. Kirkland begun his killing spree over a 3-year period. He killed 4 women, 2 of them being teenagers. Kirkland was arrested after his 4th murder, as he was caught with one of the victims' watch and iPod, which made him a lead suspect. Eventually, police were able to pin all the murders to Kirkland. Now in court, as the charges are being read out, Kirkland is facing the death penalty, and next he appears to faint.
Count 4, aggravated murder.
Kirkland was later found guilty on all charges and sentenced to death. He is currently on death row awaiting his execution at the Chillicothe Correctional Facility.